Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole stack of research, articles, data, and boil it down to the insights that matter for you. Today, we're tackling a big question, especially if you're into the NFL, maybe play some fantasy football. Can a player's weight actually predict how successful an NFL tight end will be? We've really gone deep on this one using, comprehensive source material. We're talking NFL combine numbers, PPR fantasy football data, looking at top finishers all the way back to 2003.
That's right. And the goal here wasn't just to list a bunch of weights. It was really about crunching the numbers from this pretty massive data set. We wanted to see if we could uncover, valuable patterns, maybe even surprising ones that could genuinely help you understand what goes into making a successful tight end these days.
Right.
Really trying to give you that edge, that deeper understanding, without you having to sift through, all the raw data yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And, we started where you might expect. We looked at different performance groups like top 5 finishers, top 10, then the next tier, 11th to 30th, and even down to 31st through 50th. You'd kind of think, okay, maybe you'll see clearer differences there. Heavier guys blocking more, maybe lighter, faster guys higher up.
Mm-hmm. That's a logical first step.
But that's where we sort of hit our first snag. Despite mapping all that out, those broad averages, they just didn't show clear trends immediately.
Right. No big, obvious weight difference jumping out between the guys finishing, say, top 10 versus those finishing, 40th.
Which told us straight away, okay, we need to dig deeper than just averages. We got to look at the individual players. And going player by player, that deeper dive, well, that's where some really fascinating stuff started to surface for you. So what do we actually find? Well, it turns out there is a specific weight range that pops up more often. We found this kind of optimal zone, right?
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance, and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers' Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
Between 244 and 266 pounds.
Yeah, and that range is interesting because looking at the data, it showed up 17.6% more frequently in the top 10 fantasy finishers compared to the bottom 10 finishers in our set.
Right. So initially you think, okay, 17.6% more often. That sounds pretty predictive. Maybe we found the physical sweet spot for tight ends.
Exactly. It seems like a solid lead. But, and this is the really key part, the sort of curveball here, when we ran the actual statistical correlation analysis, looking for a direct mathematical link between weight and fantasy points, well, the numbers told a very different story. There's practically no statistical correlation. The Pearson value was 0.008, almost zero.
Wow. Okay, so 0.008. That's incredibly low.
It really is.
Draft capital for an RB shows a much clearer statistical connection to their future success. But for tight end weight, this data suggests it's basically, statistically speaking, a non-factor on its own.
That's fascinating, isn't it? You see this physical trait show up more often in top guys, but the math says it doesn't actually predict the success. What does that tell us about, focusing too much on just one physical metric like weight?
It's a really crucial point, I think. It highlights just how complex performance at this elite level is. We naturally look for these simple, measurable things, weight, height, speed times. But this analysis kind of shows that while a certain body type might be common among successful players, it isn't necessarily causing the success. It strongly suggests other factors, receiving skills, blocking technique, maybe route running nuance, hands, football IQ, how they fit the team's scheme, those things are likely far more important drivers than just their weight.
That makes sense. It's a whole package deal.
Exactly.
And there was another layer, too, wasn't there? Something about how things have changed over time. We found that tight ends in that so-called optimal weight range are actually showing up less in the top 10 recently.
Yeah, that was another interesting finding, a 15.8% drop in their prevalence among top 10 finishers in the last decade compared to the decade before.
So if the game's changing and weight doesn't correlate strongly anyway, what might be driving that shift away from even that previously common weight range?
Well, it strongly hints at the evolution of the tight end position itself, doesn't it? The NFL has become much more pass-oriented over the years. So tight ends are maybe being asked to be more like big receivers agile, threats downfield rather than just traditional inline blockers.
Uh-huh. Different skill set needed?
Potentially, yeah, which could mean teams are prioritizing a slightly different athletic profile, maybe leaner, faster, even if they fall outside that old 244, 266 range. It just shows the game doesn't stand still. Okay, so let's try and bring this all together for you listening. What we found in this deep dive is, yes, there seems to be an optimal weight range, 244 to 266 pounds, that does appear more frequently in top-performing tight ends, but... and this is the big takeaway, the statistical analysis, the hard numbers, show almost no significant correlation between that weight and actual fantasy points scored. It's near zero.
A stark contrast to something like RB Draft Capital, which does show that strong link.
Right. And then you add that decadal shift on top. Fewer guys in that 244, 266 range are hitting the top 10 recently, about a 15.8% drop.
And I think what's really provocative to think about here is this. If a physical trait like weight doesn't actually correlate statistically with success, what does that really tell us? It forces you to look beyond the simple measurements, doesn't it? It suggests that success in these really dynamic, complex sports comes down to a much more nuanced mix. We're talking skills, adaptability, how a player fits their role, maybe intelligence, things that are harder to measure than just stepping on a scale. It really highlights the challenge of trying to predict performance using just one single metric.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? If weight isn't the key predictor we might intuitively think it is, what are those other, maybe less obvious factors that truly drive tight end performance? Something definitely worth mulling over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.